Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for Truth show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to a Time for Truth show, and Happy New Year 2025. What a great year it's going to be. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and tonight it's fitting and appropriate that we're going to pay tribute to those men and women who make it possible for us in America to live the freedom that we have, to celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, any holiday, because we have freedom, who allowed us to celebrate this new year and who give us our life the way we want, with freedom, democracy, the veterans of all our armed forces who give and risk their lives for the freedom that we have. And tonight's show is a tribute to them, and we're very lucky. We're going to get right to introduce you. We have a very special guest, a veteran himself, an engineer. If you put him up on the screen with the pictures, we're going to introduce with his images Fred Smith, founder and CEO of Speed Scaling, that since 2016, with his business scaling expertise, he's dedicated his life to helping leaders achieve the impossible and improving business faster, ethically, and profitably. Unbelievable that could be. His journey to success began in the Marine Corps, where after conquering military-related PTSD and mastering precision and execution under demanding circumstances, he went on to collaborate with online industry giants like Traffic and Funnels, Audience Lab, and offline multinational companies like Kia, Hyundai. Smith advanced digital marketing expertise and holds a psychology degree from St. Leo University, having trained at the National Cryptologic University. He's the founder of Digital Marketing Creative Strategy Agency, the founder of Mind Study International, manager of PDOCS Lab Ventures, of Kia Motors, America Group Facilitator, Hyundai Capital America Regional Sales Manager. There you see him. Fred founded College Funding Biz, the nation's top college funding strategy firm, guiding families through the labyrinth of funding, grants, and scholarships for college, and helping families through that travail. As a GMA group, he was senior district manager, spearheading in-house initiatives for Volkswagen, Audi, Hyundai, Kia, with emerging partnerships with Mercedes and Porsche, creating a 35% increase in sales his first year at California P&I, and culminating in being awarded the Platinum Award as the #1 district manager nationally. As a Marine, he was public affairs specialist and mass communication chief, coordinating public affairs, managing execution of domestic and foreign communications, preparing military generals for media interviews, writing, editing press releases, crafting 300 of them, award-winning articles all, and directing a newsroom, all culminating in being awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal. I cut out probably 80% of his bio, or we'd never have a show tonight. And what he has to say is much more important than all what he's accomplished. And Engineer Buddha, if you will, let's put him up on the screen and welcome founder, director, Mr. Fred Smith to A Time for Truth show. Welcome, Mr. Smith.
Hey, how are you today? You got me smiling so hard. I really appreciate the introduction. Honored and thankful to be here. Thank you.
You are quite an amazing human being. And I know some of my friends said, when does this guy sleep? Or did he get Congress to do some kind of different change to the 24-hour day? It's amazing what you've done.
It's funny. I do get that a lot. My wife is like, you're up when I am, just before I am up, and when I go to bed, you're still up. It's some of it's still trauma related. I'm going through it. And I had mentioned that to some of the veterans on Saturday, where trauma can blow you out of your head both ways, either negative or positive. And I've had a chance to really go through it all. And that's one of the actual conditions of trauma, is you just continue to work. And I'm just like, well, if I'm stuck, I might as well make something positive out of it. So that's it.
Well, you know what? You've done tremendous amount of positive. So I want to get right to the interview because your life is such a great example. So first I want to ask you, when you were a young guy, what were your dreams?
I appreciate that. My dreams at that time was just surviving. I'm from the inner city. I'm from Chester, Pennsylvania. And a lot of my friends who I know, they're not here. They didn't make it past the first round, which was just being in the streets and coming up until that point in 17. And I know you can't hear it in my voice, but this is the part where I was trained as a broadcaster in the Marine Corps. And I always have to bring it up early because when I go back to Philly, people think I got a brain transplant. So it's just like, well, you know.
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah, but that was one of my goals, was to just survive that environment. And then the second goal after that was to just really, I just really want to live a complete, full life and help people around me, because I know what it's like to want and need. And I know what it's like to be homeless. I've experienced a lot, and I'm just super grateful and thankful that I'm able to communicate and articulate. But that was my biggest dream, though, was just really getting out of the hood and being in a position where I can help other people out and give back.
Well, you know what? Your life is a testament to what you're talking about. And so I want to ask you, because you went through something that a lot of veterans and also other people in our country are going through, and you got through it. So what I wanted to ask you is, how did you overcome PTSD and then go on, and I use this because I love the movie, and you became Maximus?
Wow, I appreciate that. With me, it was, I just stayed close to what my training was in the Marine Corps. And the reasons why I say that is because in the Marines, I don't know about the rest of the services, as far as I know they go through boot camp. But in the Marine Corps, we're specifically trained for the first 90 days to just be a U.S. Marine. And you're either the first ones to fight or you're the first dead ones, take your pick. And as profoundly simple as that is, me just mastering the mundane of my training and really embodying it. When I was out there in a combat situations, I was literally stuck out in the desert by myself on record for over 30 days. I didn't know what unit I'd be able to attach myself to because we were in a real combat situation at that time. And the problem that I had was I didn't even know where my next meal was coming from. So I was eating anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day for the MRE, meals ready to eat. And I would just show up sometimes to places and people were like, who is this guy? And how did he even know we were here? I mean, that's how clandestine some of the stuff I was doing was. And I think around maybe the 13th or 14th day, I met up with another Marine who happened to be a force reconnaissance Marine. And then we wind up just because he got stuck out there too. This was back in 98 when there was a bombing in Eritrea. And some of the guys who I was attached with originally at FAST Company, Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team in the Marine Corps, they reminded me of just how we say in the Marine Corps, we're a force in readiness. So I just kept one foot in front of the other. And somehow, some way, I got out of that situation. And I say it all the time, there's no atheists in combat. So when I literally got stuck out there, I'm just like, God, if I can get through this, I'll do whatever you want. And that's really, that single-handedly has just kept me even keeled throughout my whole life.
Well, you know what? I can see that you appreciated what occurred and you took it. And I think one of the examples I learned from you is taking adversity, learning from it, not complaining about it or moaning about it, but then going to a higher level, which leads me to something I wanted to ask you. The NIMH in 2023 reported that 1 in 5 veterans experiences severe mental health challenges after the service, and that our vets often leave the service feeling disconnected from, the true potential. And, that many report feeling isolated, as in VA 2023. So what I want to ask you is, why do you think veterans struggle so much after their experience in the military?
That is an amazing question. I think we forget. I think we forget that our superpower was dialed in before we swore in to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. It's called our Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery Test, also known as the ASVAB. So I took that test like everybody else in the military. But what I did was, when I started struggling out here, and it took me a while to finally really get to the point where I was struggling, because as you had mentioned, I did some crazy, insane things that are on record, and I kind of look at that and go, whoa. So when I asked myself when I was struggling and I started really having the PTSD symptoms like hard, and I'll give you an example, around April of 2020, I dropped almost 30 pounds. I felt like I was back. Yeah, I felt like I was back on ship. The whole house was rocking. Like, I went through it hard and I nearly died. Like, literally my jaw was locking up. I ran down the street. It's about 2.2 miles around the whole block. And I'm literally running. And my wife is just like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I just got to keep moving. I don't know what's going on. I just got to keep moving." It was at that moment where I had to ask myself, where was I last doing well? And from there, I started remembering my strength, because at that point in time, that was in the middle of the pandemic, just about to start. So we couldn't go to the hospitals. There was endless waits. My dad died during the pandemic. So it was just a lot of things that were going on. But I think we forget as veterans that we are very resilient in comparison to the environment we're coming back to. And part of one of my things that I had to do in the Marine Corps, since I was a public affairs and media relations specialist, I was directly responsible for briefing Marines and sailors coming back home to their families after being deployed for 6 months, because I was deployed. So I started eating my own cooking again. I'm like, wait, I was already debriefed on this stuff. Like, wait. And so I started just remembering, but it just took me literally going outside, almost dying, to go, I got too much life to live. And I really made that decision at that moment to just really focus in on my training that got me out of the combat situations.
Wow. Well, tremendous realization of what is there. And it's very interesting what you said, going back and really realizing where you were last doing well, so you get yourself out of the confusion. A very interesting principle you just brought out that, that you're sharing with all of us. And I know a lot of veterans are going to watch this show, and it's important for them, because these guys and these women, I'm from Connecticut, so everybody's a guy in Connecticut, but our men and women, they deserve this. So what I want to ask you again, for them, and also for the viewers, and for those out there who have centers that'd like to help the veterans, How do you feel that this trauma that our veterans go through, the PTSD that they can develop, how do you feel that when it's properly really acknowledged, without labeling or belittling, and can actually become a source of strength and emotional resilience for veterans?
That is another genius question. So that's what makes me different. And I know we've been talking a lot. And the way that I was trained in the military, especially the Marine Corps, was very different because I was trained at the National Cryptologic Institute level, which is an NSA school, as an example. And one of the things that we were taught was questions are the answer. I'll just say it that broad for a reason. And what I mean by that is that if we're able to ask a better question, no different than if you're trying to prompt AI these days for like Chat GPT or any other language model, you're going to get a better answer. So I think if we start really understanding why we were trained the way that we were in the first place, we weren't trained to have a coffee and donut sit down with our quote unquote enemy. We were taught to get the job done, and it always was mission accomplishment and troop welfare. So if we can remember that that's how we were trained and conditioned to serve that one function, then it only stands sense to realize at some point in time that we are no longer in a dangerous environment like that. And once we really say it out loud, it started taking the energy off of what I was experiencing. And then I had to learn the habit and develop. And I say this in all my speeches now, literally, I need your help. We said it when we were in the military. We didn't say it as direct, but that's what the teamwork was for. It was an implied version of that. As civilians, we aren't being trained to say that. And that was my biggest problem, was even though I have all of those successful accolades, when it came time for me to actually get help because I didn't have a team around me anymore, I totally forgot that I needed help. I actually forgot. And it wasn't until I started seeing when I was losing, which was my sanity, my mental health, my family, because I nearly almost burned the house down from being on drugs. So I've been through it. I understand what it really takes to get to that point where I capitulated and was just like, I need help. That's it.
Very interesting, because you bring out something that really leads me into what we're going to talk about next. And we have a great U.S. Surgeon General in position right now. And the U.S. Surgeon General put out an advisory in the winter of last year, actually, on the epidemic we have in the U.S. of loneliness and isolation. And what he said, basically, to paraphrase it, but it's a whole advisory that people should really look at, that our lack of social interaction, which is what you're saying with the team, you lost your team, that our lack of social interaction not only made us feel lonely and isolated, but actually led to physical diseases, increased mortality, heart attacks, lung disease, and mental well-being, obviously. And on top of that, he even went further when he researched scientific epidemiological studies. The Surgeon General also said that it's actually what we're trying to solve in our communities: the violence, the drugs, the homelessness. And so taking what the U.S. Surgeon General recently mentioned in his advisory about the importance of that interaction, and that the fact that the VA in 2023 reported that vets, with strong peer connections, had lower rates of suicidal tendencies. So with that in mind, what I want to ask you is, tell us your view on the importance of creating a space where the veterans can actually have freedom to communicate without fear of being judged, commanded, reprimanded, court-martialed, or whatever. They're just feeling free to be a human being.
Man, you're killing it right now. I love these questions. And look, I was, again, going back to my military training. Okay. I was responsible for feeding the news. I was responsible for telling the news what to say next. Like, I was that guy. And this is back in 1996, before there was social media, before there was a real internet presence. And I missed all of that through the other things that I did, as you had mentioned earlier in the program, because that's a whole different environment that I was privy to. So I didn't really even have a total grasp of the civilian version of using social media, understanding how these algorithms can actually affect your mental health. Because the first thing that I was ordered to do in the Marine Corps was not watch TV, news, and the radio. Like, so I didn't start doing that until November of 2020. So to really give you the kind of context, from 1996 until November of 2020, I've been this pretty much just in the mix, just working the way that I've been working. So my viewpoint is super unique and it's super unaltered because I understand how traditional communication actually works. I understand in its fullest concepts and context communication cycles. I understand how information works. I understand signals. So my mind is somewhat wired differently to understand that I have more wherewithal for counter intelligence than I have the propaganda that we're seeing out here today. That is the problem that everybody's facing. And that was something that actually was facilitated around 2012, 2013 with the MAC Act. There are even publications that are around the world that focus in on American propaganda. And the books that I want to get start at $5,000. I'm just like, well, I kind of understand it, but I say all that to say this: we we have a choice these days. We can really understand that once we need help and we see help and we're willing to actually reach for the help, that's when you start seeing all the other alternatives and options out there. And currently there aren't a lot, but there are enough. But you have to surround yourself, online or offline, with people in your group who are going to be mutually beneficial to you. And once I came to that reality to say, okay, well, I know that my Marines had my back. I know that when I was out on the deployment, these guys had my back. I know when I was in the automotive industry, we had teams all around us and it was all about collaboration. Now, why is it all of a sudden when I come into the middle of all this noise and status quo, I just turned into a pumpkin and it's all this confusion out here? And I'm pretty good on, as far as finding information goes. Like, I'm one of the best trained on the planet to do that. But to really understand that a lot of this stuff is gatekept and you have to sometimes pay exorbitant fees to possibly get the right information. I think if we focus more or less on understanding how the mechanisms of suppression work from an information viewpoint, we'll be able to really understand that the deck really is stacked against us, but more specifically, something can be done about it. And it just starts with reaching for help.
Absolutely. I mean, so well said. And you know, that's exactly why this show actually was born about 4 years ago, because I looked around at exactly what you were saying. And I said, you know, I'm a surgeon of 44 years. I place implants, do periodontal treatment. But I realized, I saw what was going on with the vets. I saw what was going on with illicit drugs. I saw what was going on with the violence, which is 90% from the drugs. And like you said, I realized, okay, you know what? I'm going to do the best I can. And as it happens, you and I now are here together. And it's all like evolution. Everything is an evolution. And, you know, it's coming to a higher level. So what I wanted to ask you, because we're totally in unison, and I think the vets out there, you know, could take a new war on, by the way, while we're doing this show, where we help our vets, and then the vets get a new war. They save all the youth of America from drugs, and they educate them. I think no better person than a vet who's already tried to save the country in war now can save them as their uncle, their grandfather, you know, in a different role model. And so I wanted to ask you, you have a group, I think it's called the Southern California Center for Human Performance, to introduce veterans back into the environment, to explain to them about their unmatched discipline. So tell us about that.
No, I appreciate that. It is definitely at this present time a grassroots effort. It started around this time last year when I worked on my fourth published book, and I had a publisher look at it They're very well known. They've done a lot of shadow writing for some of the world's top like thought leaders. And when they looked at it, they were like, "Yeah, you going to publish this?" I'm just like, "No." Like, what do you mean no? I'm like, "This one is for the people," because what happens is I had to literally invent tools that were going to make me succeed no matter what. Again, I got to remind you, I didn't have two nickels to rub together. I've made millions and I've lost millions. But the thing that I've been able to keep are the tools to help me rebuild no matter what. And that's what I share with anybody, but particularly veterans, because we already have an edge. The edge that we have is that we've already been stripped down initially of all of our bad habits in order to really assume our post as servicemen and women around the world. Sometimes we're going to forget that because we're going back into civilian life and that accountability piece is missing. So, or other things may have happened, or it's so many other variables that get parsed into the science that we were trained as literally service members. It's a science. So what I saw, especially all the successful actions that I personally used to scale up several companies from zero to a few hundred million, and they all became multi-billion-dollar companies from scratch, and they're still in existence to this day, mainly on the financing insurance side of the automotive industry. So in other words, you go to buy like a service contract, you go to buy the car, and then people buy the ancillary products. I not only trained that stuff, but I developed it. I started from scratch. I just took all of my common sense principles. I took all my street experience. I did door-to-door sales. I was in the desert, and just everything just culminated into a 30-year book that I wrote. And the book is called Creators. And the whole purpose of that book is a download of my brain. It may not be perfect, but it's definitely workable. So, and I was able to really just say, hey, regardless of where you're at personally and professionally, there's something right now that is currently not working in your environment that we just need to step back a little bit and take a look at to see how it can, what is that one little particle, that little piece of sand that's in your nuclear reactor that's causing a whole thing to shut down. And it's that concept of small hinges swinging bigger doors, because sometimes it's not this big thing. Because it took me, I traveled as a consultant professionally, and I'm looking at a picture right now. Auto Nation guys, Mike Jackson, Mike Maroney, and the late Wayne Huizenga used to run the Miami Dolphins, right? These are guys who I worked with directly, and it was just like, we all should have this technology. So I was able to distill it down in a simple, easy to understand way where as long as you're reaching for help, you can see what page you're on and just start reverse engineering your own success. You don't really need me. I designed my stuff so that you never, ever, ever need me, because it's about the processes, not necessarily the person. So the Southern California Center for Human Performance reflects that. It reflects the fact that you already have a superpower. You're just a diamond that's just stuck in the mud. Let's pull you out the mud. Let's just polish you up a little bit. Maybe you need a new setting in the ring, but you're out here to shine. You didn't go through all of that stuff just to continue to go down this dwindling spiral of failure, because failure is a part of learned helplessness, and I refuse to believe that. What I believe personally and professionally is that when you get the right knowledge and you understand the why of it, and you understand the rules involved with the game, and you start taking those specific actions, to me, it's no different than cake mix, me buying it, Duncan Hines in California or cake mix in Florida. It's the cake mix. You just do this. You set the oven to 450. That's how predictable success is. And I believe everybody can do that. But I want to start with the veterans first, because we have a huge edge. And I believe veterans by DNA, this is just my bias, I believe that we are very capable of really turning our challenges into thriving communities. I really believe that.
I totally agree with you. That's why, I had started before the pandemic, and it was taking off really, this American Dentists Give Back to Veterans, to really take my fellow colleagues in dentistry. And we were doing a day where we'd see veterans, examine them, help them with their gums, their teeth. And actually, here in New York City, Commissioner Hendon of New York City, great guy. He loved the program. And in California, actually, Senator Rubio wanted to get it all going, and then COVID hit, and like it did so many things. But you like kind of revitalized me with what you're doing. What I want to ask you before we forget, if they want to reach you at your institute, what is the email they write to?
Well, that's a good one. They can actually reach me at fred@ifix.marketing. They can reach me directly there, or they can actually go to speedscaling.com. But I would prefer them to just go to fred@ifix.marketing, because that's my more active. I have pretty much everything automated, so I can just focus in on what we're talking about.
Sounds good. Well, I tell you what, we've only done half of the questions, but you and I have covered so much ground, and unfortunately, what always happens when you have something that's really good, the time has flown by. We had a great time here. I'm sure the veterans who are going to watch this are going to love it. I have a friend of mine, Manny, and Manny Rodriguez is having a veterans reunion, I think, in the Bronx, VA. He told me if I would come, maybe I can play this show for them. And let me ask you a question. If we can get a time between the two of us, will you come back so we can finish our show?
Oh, 1,000,000%. I'm thankful and honored that this exists, because I'm officially out of a certain fog in my life, and it's to that point now where, and I have 6 kids, so it's one of those things where my focus is really on sharing what I know. This is not theory. This is like real world, like step 1, do this, step 2. But if you have to be willing and able and reaching for help, and that is the key. That is single-handedly is the key. I cannot emphasize that anymore. Like I want to put a period.
You know what? It's been a pleasure to speak to you. I know that a lot's going to happen for our vets in this coming year. And for those of you watching, this is part 1. So we have more episodes to come, maybe more than part 2, who knows. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show.
Thank you for having me. Super thankful to be in your orbit.
Likewise. So for those of you watching, we'll see you on the next episode of A Time for Truth show. Have a good night.
This show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet